hello, Ted. I haven't, well, Commissioner Terry.
Yes.
I have not seen you today as we move to and fro. I'm going to go ahead and kick off. I think I'm first, perhaps, yes, with greetings. Let me say thank you to everyone who has joined us this evening as we discuss the Unified Plan for DeKalb County, Georgia. This is very exciting because our unified plan is a combination of all long-term strategic plans that will chart the growth of DeKalb County. Everything from our transportation to our long-term land use as well as policy. And this evening, we will have discussions concerning our current comprehensive and unified plan and how they all come together. And it is very important that you are present and have a seat at the table for this important conversation so that you play a key role in the future of DeKalb as we're moving forward and what our communities look like. And at this time, I will turn it over to Commissioner Terry to make opening remarks as well.
Thank you, Commissioner Cochran-Johnson, and I will keep it brief because I know we have a lot to cover tonight. As you mentioned, this is a big strategic plan that involves land use, transportation, and really touches on almost every aspect of who we are and what we want our community, what our county to look like in 2050. I hope that I'm still alive in 2050, Commissioner. I think if we have pretty good health insurance and we have a good wellness program at DeKalb County, so I think we're on track. But to a certain extent, this is kind of in the adage of planting the seeds to which a tree will grow that we may not sit in the shade of, or in other words, the legacy that we build today is going to impact so many people in the future, some that we may never even know. But this exercise that we are going through not only is required by law, but is just a tremendous opportunity for us to get down to what it is we want DeKalb County to be. And so I'm really excited about really all the work that has been done over the last year. We've had so many meetings and so many surveys and so many discussions and introspection about what we want to see, and we're kind of in sort of near the final stages, but we're excited, I think, about this opportunity tonight to get even more feedback, to dive a little bit deeper, to update on some recommendations. So I'll turn it back over to the team here, but thanks again, everyone, and really appreciate Commissioner Cochran-Johnson's team for really helping pull a lot of the logistics and everything together. She's done tremendous work. And let me just say congratulations on your reelection, Commissioner Cochran-Johnson. It's so gratifying to see that the voters have recognized the leadership and the wisdom that I think you have shown during your, now going in your fourth year as commissioner. And it's really gratifying to me to see some of the things that you had really highlighted as priorities when you first became a commissioner, and to see them come to fruition now is just really remarkable. So I want to just say publicly congratulate you for everything that you're doing. I'm so excited that we get another 4 years to work with you because DeKalb County is better because of it. Thank you.
Well, Commissioner Terry, I didn't expect that. And, I appreciate everyone, and I appreciate you because you're very passionate. We're all individuals, but when we come together, the whole is better than the sum of its parts. I truly love DeKalb and I want to see us better. So I'm very grateful to the people for giving me the opportunity to complete what I've started. I don't see myself just doing this again and again without results. So the best is yet to come. And with that said, I'm going to go straight into our bios at this time. And Allison, and let me also say thank you, because God knows I have an absolutely incredible team that surrounds me. And thank you, Allison, because I see you have put up our first panel member. And of course, our first panel member that I'll introduce is Mr. Andrew Baker, and he is our Director of Planning and Sustainability for DeKalb County, Georgia. Mr. Baker brings a wealth of knowledge. He manages our long-range planning, our current planning, as well as our building services, neighborhood empowerment, and code compliance. He joined DeKalb County in 2006 as an associate director of planning. Prior to joining DeKalb County, he worked for the City of Columbia in South Carolina as a community development specialist and later as a zoning analyst. In addition, he has worked for the Hillsborough County City County Planning Commission in Tampa, Florida, where he oversaw comprehensive plan, suburban coordination, and zoning reviews. I could go on, but he's, I won't do that because I don't want us to get too bogged down on time. But Mr. Baker, of course, has a degree in business administration from Maryville College in Tennessee and a master's degree in urban planning from the University of Tennessee, Knoxville. And he is AICP certified and serves on a division of the National American Planning Association. Thank you for joining us this evening, Mr. Baker. Next up, we have Mr. Michael Hightower, and he is a valued partner in DeKalb, as well as being the managing partner of the collaborative firm. He established the firm in 2002 and serves as the managing partner there. He has extensive experience in the public and private sectors, as well as education arena, which includes knowledge of public policy with an emphasis on planning, economic development, and local governance issues. He has served 6 years on the College Park City Council and was the first African-American to serve in that capacity. He was later elected to the Fulton County Board of Commissioners, where he served 14 years and made major contributions to unincorporated South Fulton County and beyond. He served as vice chairman during much of his tenure and was a member of several boards and committees. And he was also elected by his peers to serve as the president of the National Association of Counties, NACO, of which currently we have the distinct honor of having Commissioner Larry Johnson serve as president. But as a part of NACO, he focuses on welfare reform, affordable housing, and sustainable communities. Thank you, Mr. Hightower, for being present. And last, I will introduce Ms. Christina Pastmore, and she is a traffic engineer and transportation planner for Kimley Horn. Christina has been a transportation planner and traffic engineer in Atlanta for the past 17 years. She specializes in the management of comprehensive multimodal transportation plans, corridor studies, and small area plans, as well as trail and transit master plans. In addition to her project-related work, Christina has served as the office practice leader for Kimley Horn's Atlanta Transportation Planning and Traffic Operations Group. She is a native of Ohio, and she has received a bachelor's degree in civil engineering from the University of Akron before moving to Atlanta to attend Georgia Tech, where she completed a dual master's degree in both civil engineering and city and regional planning. Thank you so much, Ms. Passmore, for joining us this evening, and she is our current consultant project manager for the 2050 Unified Plan. And at this time, I'll turn it over to you, Commissioner Terry, for the remaining introductions.
Thank you, Commissioner Cochran-Johnson, and rounding out our all-star panel. Next, we have Mr. Grady Smith, the Transportation Southeast Market Leader and Principal at Vaness, Hagen and Brustling Incorporated. I think that's a consulting firm. And Grady Smith is a principal in Transportation Southeast. I've said that already. With 2 decades of extensive professional experience in transportation, transit planning, and traffic services. Grady's background includes serving as principal in charge and project manager on numerous transportation and transit planning studies for both public and private sector clients across Metro Atlanta and the Southeast region. Adopted by the DeKalb County Board of Commissioners in 2019, Grady served as the consultant project manager for the DeKalb County Transit Master Plan. Other efforts led by Grady include major capital investment studies, transportation corridor studies, traffic analysis, congestion management system planning, transit route development studies, transit-friendly design standards, manuals, freight and goods movement studies, and regional long-range transportation plans. Let's welcome Mr. Grady Smith. Thank you for being here. Next, we have Ms. Sylvia Smith, Planning Manager in Long Range Division here in DeKalb County Government. She is with the Long Range Planning Division and Planning and Sustainability Department for the county. She has over 25 years of knowledge and expertise in transportation planning, transportation engineering, architecture, reviewing contracts, and preparing proposals for projects. She has experience in community outreach and previously managed the traffic calming program, managing capital improvement programs, along with managing the transportation plan and the comprehensive plan. Ms. Smith has worked with other professionals in the public and private sectors to help improve the quality of life of everyday citizens. She is a native of Decatur, Georgia. She received her bachelor's degree in architecture from Tuskegee University. Welcome, Ms. Sylvia Smith. And finally, we have Mr. John Tooley, our land use planner for Kimley Horn, a consulting firm. John has worked in urban planning and community development for 16 years. He earned an undergraduate dual degree in marketing and management from Lipscomb University and his master's in city and regional planning from the Georgia Institute of Technology, Georgia Tech. John joined Kimley Horn in 2019, where he serves as a planner and project manager focused on local and regional planning, community and economic development, airport and airport area planning, transit-oriented development, and other multidisciplinary planning initiatives. And then prior to joining Kimley Horn, John did work for the Atlanta Regional Commission, where he served as senior principal planner and managing director of Catalyst, economic development strategy for the Atlanta region. And in these roles, John also served as a founding member and primary staff for the Aerotropolis Atlanta initiative, oversaw housing-related work, including the creation of the Metro Atlanta Housing Strategy, and served as project manager for the Livable Centers Initiative, also known as LCI studies. And so that is our panel, Commissioner. All the experts are here.
So I think we are now ready to have the conversation. We're going to continue down. And at this point, I believe what we're going to have is a presentation, a PowerPoint. And it's the 2050 Unified Plan team slides. So at this time, let's gear up for the actual presentation.
Great. Thank you, Commissioners. First off, my name is Andrew Baker. I'm the Director for the Planning and Sustainability Department, and we're excited. We're excited because we have two super district commissioners actually coming together to have a joint town hall, a unified town hall, and how perfect it is for us to be discussing the unified plan. So I'm excited because what usually happens is we go through a time period or a year where we're talking about a comprehensive land use plan. And we talk about where should suburban go, what should be the densities and so forth. And then a couple of years later, we start the whole process over talking about a comprehensive transportation plan. Are we going to have rail? What roads need to be widened? So for the first time in our conversations with the Atlanta Regional Commission, they said, why don't you guys be the first test to do a unified plan that combines both the comprehensive land use plan and tie it together with your future growth for transportation. So we're the first in the Atlanta Metro to do that. And I am pleased to announce that we do have an all-star team. I am pleased to have the members that are on this panel and involved with this project. There couldn't be a better team assembled to really go through this exercise. At the end, and most important, I want to thank the participants, the citizens, because our vision will not be complete. It will not be right if we don't have the input from the citizens. So on behalf of the department, on behalf of DeKalb, I'm excited. And I want to say thank you to the participants as well. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to my all-star project manager, Ms. Sylvia Smith.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us. Next slide, please. So tonight, we're going to briefly go over the schedule, what has been done, what we heard, draft transportation and land use recommendations, engagement opportunities, and questions. Next slide. So as you can see on our project schedule, we started this project in April of 2021. And we went through visions, goals, needs, and opportunities with the community. We talked about transportation nexus, our recommendations, and we've had a series of public meetings, engagement meetings, stakeholders meetings, and which we'll talk about that a little later. And so now we're at the point of having our final round of meetings, and this is our town hall meeting tonight, and we're so glad that you joined us. And we would like for you to just get your questions ready, put them in the chat, and we are able so that we're able to answer those questions and get them to you. So the next phase after this, we'll be going through a round with our public, with community council and planning commission and our various subcommittees from the commissioners. And then we're looking to hope to get this adopted sometime in the fall. Next slide, please. So now what I will do is I will turn this over to our other project manager, Christina, and she will discuss what has been done today.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Sylvia. And thank you all again for joining us. So this, as Sylvia mentioned, we started around a little over a year ago, and we've been doing a lot in that time. So we want to talk just a little bit about what has been done so far. First of all, there's a rather robust document that you can actually find on the website that really comprises our existing conditions and our needs assessment. What that document includes is a review of the various planning activities that have come before us. DeKalb has been doing a lot of great planning. We want to build on that. It really helped us to understand our existing conditions and then also project future needs, not all the way just to 2050, but also in the short term. What are the next 5 years potentially going to look like? It considers different things such as our people, our communities, the places or the land use that's represented, and then the overall mobility and transportation elements. So the document is available on our website. You're welcome to look at it. It's got a lot of great information. We've also been doing just a tremendous amount of targeted stakeholder outreach. That's included, obviously, as you can tell from our partnership tonight with our super district commissioners, a lot of engagement of the CEO and the board, as well as some of the other standing committees. We've assembled a transportation and land use committee that really incorporates a number of different technical and agency representatives. We have a number of different stakeholder groups that we've engaged a couple of times throughout the process, including our civic and business associations and higher education and medical groups. And then we've also hosted a series of individual focus group meetings that have allowed us to really target specific topics and groups of people to make sure that we understand their different perspectives. I want to make sure to point out also just specifically our multicultural and BIPOC groups, that while that represents one block in the overarching graphic that you see there, it actually represents a number of different communities in the English learning community in particular, where we've had a chance to really engage with various multicultural groups and understand the specific needs that they have. It has been a tremendously valuable process to be able to engage with all of these groups. In addition to some of our stakeholder engagement, we've also had larger public engagement throughout the process. What you can see here is just a summary of all of the engagement efforts that we've had so far. A number of different meetings for stakeholder and focus groups, meetings with the commissioners, the community councils, and thus far up to tonight have had 11 public meetings. We also have hosted a number of other engagement opportunities, pop-ups where we go out into the community to festivals and parks to try to really meet people where they are. We've hosted a number of different community presentations, had 2 online surveys, one of which is still open tonight. We'll talk a lot about that later on. And then a website and social media that we've been able to leverage as well. So through that process, we've been able to gather a lot of input, and the input that you have provided up to this point has really helped us to really craft our recommendations. So Michael's going to spend a little bit of time talking to you about what we heard in our first round of engagement.
Thanks, Christina. And of course, thank you again to the citizens of DeKalb County. Clearly, one of the things that we heard loud and clear was, and this is of course in a ranked order, was for this process and the need to provide transportation options through connectivity across modes and different modes of transportation. These are the top 4. Those modes, of course, involve obviously trails, bikes, transit, of course, bus, etc. Number two, we received a lot of feedback on healthy communities, especially the quality of life. That is a very high priority that we heard regarding transportation priorities. Safety is always high, and of course, it ranked number 3 in this category. And of course, improve maintenance, which is critical, particularly as it relates to some of the other bus and other types of operations. Clearly, during this time, we heard some great things about equity, but I won't go down the entire list. But equity was also in the top 5. Thanks, Christina. The next slide. We had good things happening in DeKalb. As you can tell, a lot of focus, a lot of feedback came from many of our retail and shopping districts, Tucker Hills, Emory Village, Broadcliff and North Druid Hills Town Center, the popular intersection of North Decatur and Scott Boulevard, which I frequent sometimes, and of course the Oak Grove Neighborhood Center. And where would you like to see good things happen? Of course, the North DeKalb Mall, Town Center, North Lake Regional Mall, Memorial Drive in Columbia, Claremont and Broadcliff, and of course the I-20 and County Road Town Center. Those were some areas in which we heard loud and clear that we would like to see good things happen. Project types that we heard most about, of course, bicycle, which has been a growing demand throughout the region and in DeKalb. Pedestrian facilities where obviously we can have a lot of walking as a way of life. Safety, traffic, and of course, transit always is a big piece of this conversation. Clearly, what we hear the most about, as Christina and Andrew said earlier, is tying the two together, that transportation and land use nexus. As we held several meetings throughout the county, that was very evident. And some of the meetings we held at a time in which we were able to visually have examples while we have some of the pop-ups where citizens could see firsthand land use and transportation with some of the critical intersections in the county.
All right, thanks so much, Michael. So that was a little bit of an introduction into the plan and kind of how we've gotten to this point. So what we want to do right now is to give you a little bit of an overview of both the transportation and the land use recommendations. So we're going to start off with our transportation recommendations. And I see that there have been some questions that have been put into the chat. If we can add the website into the chat, please, that would be great. The documents, everything that we've talked about is available on our Unified Plan website. So you can access all of that there. All right, so first on the transportation assumptions, we had to put together a financial framework. And so we made some assumptions around some of the conversations that we were having regarding future funding opportunities. The first is that the county has a current SPLOST program, and it's going really well. It's providing funding for transportation that hasn't been available in the past. And so first is the continuation of that countywide SPLOST program moving forward. Now we're making assumptions that are relatively conservative in terms of the amount of the revenue coming in. The original projections were about $106 million per year. And what we've seen is actually in recent years, the dollars have actually been higher than that. But for our purposes of developing this plan, we've assumed a more conservative estimate similar to the original projections, with the understanding that if new additional funds come in, that they can be allocated to other places. But we wanted to make sure to be conservative in our initial estimates. We are assuming the city allocation of SPLOST remains the same, so that 39% would come off the top. Obviously, with different changes in annexations or incorporations, that would change. But for now, we're assuming that 39%. And then we're also assuming the non-transportation portion would be coming off as well. So about 23% of the dollars would come off. So what that leaves us with is about 38% of the overall funds for unincorporated county transportation funding. Now, separately from the SPLOST, we also remember we do have the existing MARTA penny that DeKalb County residents are paying, and anyone who's spending spending money in DeKalb County. So that is technically separate, obviously, from SPLOST. It's a little bit separate from the conversation that we're having specifically around surface transportation, but that does exist and it is primarily used for the state of good repair. So Grady's going to talk a little bit later about transit. So when we're thinking about just the overall funding structure, you can see here we've divided our funds up into 3 different tiers: 6 years for the first tier, an additional 6 years for the second tier, and then 15 years for the remaining tier of projects. So it's our short, mid, and long range projects. The set aside funding is really for categories and buckets, and we're going to talk a little bit about some of those. And then the project funding is that second line item, and that's where we're allocating funds to specific projects that can be implemented over time. The total dollars then you can see at the bottom are $250 million, $265 million, and $734 million respectively for those 3 tiers. So a little bit on some of the policy recommendations that go to some of those their funding categories. The first is asset management. We know that this is something that prior to the SPLOST, DeKalb was really working to catch up on some of the paving needs in particular. So some of our recommendations around asset management include doing a more formalized pavement condition assessment and a management plan that over time will allow the county to be more proactive in its pavement management. We also recommend investing heavily in resurfacing. Currently, the county is about $151 million set aside in the current SPLOST, 6-year SPLOST program. We recommend continuing heavy investment in resurfacing, but also balancing that with new capital project opportunities, maybe intersection projects, trails, things like that. On the technology front, we also think it's really important there's so many great opportunities when it comes to technology. So first, we want to make sure to focus on programmatic levels, making sure that we have asset, software systems and asset management really understood. Invest in some of the key infrastructure needs, making sure that the signals are operational and the communication is up to date. And then as time goes on, focusing in the mid and long range on things like smart corridors and some of the advanced technology. And then finally, on the bicycle and pedestrian front, one of the things that currently exists within DeKalb County is that trail planning exists in different departments. So a recommendation is to house trail planning in one department that currently exists, and then to hire an individual who would lead all trail planning for the county, and they would be coordinating then with the liaisons from the other departments. We recommend that the county conduct a formalized trail plan, and that is actually something that is in conversation as we speak, as well as to conduct a more formalized sidewalk inventory and condition assessment to really understand where the sidewalks today and how do they look so that we can best prioritize where sidewalk funding should go. And then make sure to invest in the appropriate amount of funding for meaningful expansion. I think a lot of times we forget that things like sidewalks and trails actually do cost a good amount of money. And so in order to have meaningful expansion, we need to make sure we're setting aside the appropriate amount of money. So that gets to some of our categories of projects that are more of those set aside funds. Now I want to talk just briefly about the specific projects themselves. That we're going to talk about specific allocations of funds. So you can see here 3 categories of projects. Multi-use trails. So those could be greenways that are kind of off-road. They could be following stream beds or just working through green space, or they could be side paths running along the side of a road. So we have $140 million set aside for the entire program for multi-use trails. Small scale roadway investments are in they're kind of smaller intersections or safety projects. And then large scale roadway projects might include a number of things. They could include maybe capacity widening type projects. They could include a series of smaller intersection projects all along one corridor, or they could include multimodal roadway projects that involve both roadway investments as well as trails. So that category does involve a number of different things. So you can see that category is a $320 million set aside. So that's just a little bit of an overview of how the project funding is broken out. Now, if you go to our Unified Plan website, you can get a lot more information on the projects themselves. And actually, our public meeting presentation recordings are also there, as well as our slide deck, and it gets into more information both about the set-asides and the projects. What you can see here is just a snapshot of our tier 1, 2, and 3 project recommendations. And it gives you a little bit of an idea of the types of projects and the location of those different project recommendations. Tier 1, as a reminder, would be our short-term, tier 2, midterm, and tier 3, long-term. And so, as I mentioned, we have on our website information about each of the projects. We have an interactive map that you can go and click on each of the projects to learn more information and to give us your feedback on the project. Now, these projects are just in unincorporated DeKalb County. What we're also working on, because we know transportation knows no bounds, is we are working on coordinating with each of the cities as well. So what you see here is a little bit more of kind of a universe of aspirational projects, but we're working with each of the different cities to coordinate projects for the inclusion into the unified plan as well. But they're part of a different funding stream, and so there's a separate discussion that's happening there. So that's a little bit on our surface transportation. So Grady, let's talk a little bit about some of the transit recommendations coming out of the plan.
Sure, Christina. The good news on the transit front is many understand and might recall is that DeKalb County completed a transit master plan back in 2019. Had the opportunity to work with the leadership at DeKalb and the entire community to develop that master plan, and some real important recommendations came out of that. So that's our starting point for developing our unified plan. That master plan included 4 scenarios for investing in transit. And the scenarios were really based on potential funding opportunities, 2 of which included increases in a sales tax, which the county could undertake under House Bill 930, which allows the county to levy up to a 1-cent sales tax specifically for transit over 30 years. Those 2 scenarios included a full penny, which would raise roughly $3.65 billion over that 30-year period, or a half penny that would raise about $1.85 billion. And in each of those scenarios, we looked at transit investments across the entirety of DeKalb County. There was included in both a significant focus on South DeKalb, recognizing the lack of transit investment along the I-20 corridor, as well as the lack of transit completely in some places south of I-20. So as for an example, in the DeKalb, South DeKalb area around the Stonecrest, city of Stonecrest. There were 2 other scenarios that were predicated on, one, the state of good repair penny, no new investment. So if we continued with the current level investment that DeKalb is making into MARTA, which all those funds are right now focused on keeping our almost 50-year-old system up to a state of good repair, wouldn't be a whole lot left to do expansion or provide new services. And then the 4th scenario was really focused on some planning work that MARTA did around 2012 that was focused on a Clifton Corridor light rail potential investment, and then also a heavy rail and bus rapid transit investment in the I-20 corridor. And if we consider those based on the early planning process, it would take approximately 2 pennies or more, or even more, to implement those projects. Next slide. Some of the other important recommendations, and these are really policy-focused recommendations that came out of that plan and are still important today as we consider the unified plan. The first is there was clearly the need for additional education and public input in prioritizing the scenarios I just described. So which of the scenarios from a public perspective was the priority? We didn't make a decision. The county did not decide on a single scenario. There was also the need for education and input on innovative funding opportunities. It was recognized that just a half penny or a full penny in itself is just not enough to implement the investment in transit that's needed across the county. So things like public-private partnerships, P3 opportunities, value capture, where we try to capture the land value around stations and other transit infrastructure as it increases over time, and use that value to invest in our transit system. And then finally, taking advantage of potential new opportunities for funding from the federal government. And under our Build Back Better, or the new Investment Act that was passed in Congress, there is a significant amount of more money available for transit infrastructure. However, in most cases, those funds are competitive. So you got to bring forth a competitive project opportunity to secure those federal transit administration dollars. And we wanted to make sure whatever projects that we advanced in DeKalb County was in a position to seek out those funds and do that in a competitive nature. There's been a lot of collaboration with MARTA around unmet needs. Some of these are long-term needs, as I mentioned, along I-20, but there are a lot of other short-term needs in some areas of the county. I talked about the South DeKalb area, just south of the city of Stonecrest. We don't even have a local bus route. We have a lot of seniors aging in place and need access to transit and access to medical and sustenance. And so there are those low-hanging fruit needs that we've been coordinating with MARTA on. MARTA stepped up to the plate, and they are now looking at providing opportunities for bus-to-bus transfer hubs, one at Stonecrest, which is in design, and another one at the South DeKalb Mall. So they're beginning to listen, and we're in partnership with the county, are bringing online some new infrastructure projects in the short term that can deal with some of those needs. Collaboration with our regional partners. There's been a lot of discussion going on around the region around transit expansion, not just in DeKalb. Same thing in North and South Fulton, Clayton County. Gwinnett County, of course, is gearing up for increased transit investment. And just this past week, Cobb County has decided to move forth with a 1 cent sales tax potentially for transit in 2024. So there's a lot of agency coordination around the Atlanta region, all focused on transit. And then finally, this gets to Michael's point about transportation and land use. As we think about transit investment, it's going to be very, very important that we have the right land use, zoning, as well as investment, economic development incentives in place to make transit work. Transit requires increases in density, changes in land use in some places that have been suburban and low density for a long time to make high capacity transit and other transit investments work. This planning process, the unified plan, is really focusing in on where do we need to make those changes to make sure that transit has an opportunity to be viable in our key corridors. Next slide. And so what the road forward under the unified plan, one of the first things we're doing is confirming the need and the level of transit investment. I talked earlier about a full penny, half penny, et cetera, or even combinations of different funding recommendations to be considered as the county advances to recommendations from the master plan, as well as the recommendations from this unified plan. We want to make sure that we do a good job of documenting. It's been a while that the transit master plan was adopted in 2019. So we want to go back in and confirm and look at the projects, make sure that the benefits of those projects system-wide, but also individually, we kind of double check those to ensure that they still make sense and update them based on input from the public and from stakeholders. And then finally, the unified plan provides a great foundation or springboard to policy and to other opportunities to seek out new funding for transit. As I said at the beginning, our existing MARTA tax is tapped. It's all going to that state of good repair, and seeking out opportunities for new funding sources, be it public-private, be it a T-SPLOS referendum like many of our other neighboring counties are doing, or even value capture opportunities is going to be extremely important to developing and implementing transit investments across DeKalb. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to John, and he's going to talk a little bit more about land use.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Randy. Appreciate it. Hey, good evening, everybody. John Tooley with Kimley Horn. So we've been talking a little bit about transportation and transit for a few minutes. I want to talk a little bit about land use. This is kind of the other half of the unified plan. And so I want to talk about a couple of highlights here, and then happy to take questions and kind of dive in on any issues you all may have beyond what I cover. On your screen, what you'll see is a map of DeKalb County, and you'll notice that the cities have been removed. The comprehensive land use plan portion of the unified plan primarily looks at unincorporated DeKalb County, those places that DeKalb County has zoning authority and other land use regulation controls. What you'll notice that there's a lot of areas that are kind of highlighted on the map. You'll see purples and blues and brown areas that highlight these small focused activity centers, and you'll see this large area that's mostly kind of that pale yellow or sort of pale area that covers a lot of the county. This guides a lot of the land use and zoning decisions that come before the Planning Commission and the Board of Commissioners as they review future plans and developments that are proposed within the county. So as one major piece of the comprehensive plan, we're updating the future land use plan to reflect not only what's there now, but thinking about how the county has been changing over the past several years and where the county is going over the next 10, 20, 30 years. Thinking about infill development, new redevelopment that's happening in some areas, market and demographic shifts that have been occurring. In a lot of places, we're seeing new investment. We're seeing continued infill, continued interest from folks to move into the area, and also supporting continued county growth. We want to see the continued economic growth and job growth within the county, and so future land use map helps identify that as well. One thing to keep in mind as well is just the impact of the cities. How do we work better with our cities within DeKalb County that are neighbors to us? How do we think about those edges a little better and those places that we might be able to collaborate as well? Next slide. And so if you break this apart a little bit, there's a couple of things that we're going to talk about briefly. Again, you'll see the slide on the image on the left, the map on the left, shows you the future land use map in its whole. And I mentioned there's kind of two parts. There's these small little pockets of denser development, these activity centers, and there's this larger swath. Let's first talk about the activity centers. These are places that the county wants to see additional growth and infill development, denser development, walkable development. These are places that probably are already places you know of, the places you go to shop, to go to restaurants, to go to a park. These are places where the county envisions and sees future denser development as being appropriate, happening there, rather than denser development necessarily happening in and around the existing single-family neighborhoods that are already existing in the community. Sometimes these places already have existing transit or planned transit. Some of the things that Grady and Christina were just speaking about reflect exactly where some of these activity centers are and the high connectivity that they have to each other and to the region. A lot of times these are places that people want to be able to walk and bike, not just in, but to and from as well. And then on the right, the farthest map on the right, is kind of thinking about those residential areas. If you look at the map again, all the way on the left, you'll see that large pale yellow area that really covers from the city of Atlanta all the way to Gwinnett County to Rockdale County, from Henry County all the way up to close to Norcross. And it's just kind of currently classified as suburban. Now, on some level, that may seem appropriate, but on another level, if you think about those areas of the counties, you drive through from north to south, east to west, a lot of these residential areas are very different. The development that's already there on the ground, when it was built, the types of development that it is, the density that's already there. We think about the development that's coming in, that's being proposed. Some areas still have opportunities for a lot of infill development. Other areas really are focused on redevelopment. And so in reality, this large pale yellow area is very diverse, very different in what's happening and what's envisioned for the future. And so again, back to the map on the right, we're looking at carving out a new area to kind of think about and call out these areas where new development is looking to occur along these major corridors and thoroughfares within the residential area. So still protecting the single family areas, but providing an opportunity for different types of housing to come in an appropriate fashion. And so those are kind of the two main things that we're looking at as far as the future land use map. I'm going to dive into those just a little bit on the next slides. So again, we talked about the activity centers. The county already has several activity centers throughout the county, and these are places that DeKalb has been working hard to encourage investment. A lot of times a small area plan or an LCI study or a corridor study has occurred. There's been specific targeted investment in parks and green space and other public infrastructure to support and encourage development. What we wanted to do was update the current activity centers, see if there were any new activity centers that could be added, tweak any of the boundaries just to reflect the current market, and provide a few more details on what exactly is happening in each of those. Next slide. And I mentioned this other residential area that we're talking about carving out. So again, a lot of the county is residential single-family neighborhoods. That's still staying the same. That's not necessarily changing. But in certain areas, there's an opportunity to encourage and allow appropriate development to come in. In some cases, the market's already asking for that. Your commissioners and your planning commission are already getting requests for development in this area. How do we respond to the market in a way that allows for new development to occur, that allows new people to move into the area? But thinks about what are the things we want to make sure that we're getting out of these areas. We want to make sure that we're preserving, that we're conserving where we can. Is it green space? Is it related to stormwater runoff? Is it encouraging additional bike ped connectivity? Is it encouraging a type of design and development that's reflective and supportive of the existing single family? And then are we taking one more look at the potential negative impacts to those single family areas? And so that's this yellow area that we're carving out. That's a new residential character area. Still working on the title there, but looking for an area that's more walkable, more connected for the new developments that come in. Next slide. So I mentioned that a lot of the comprehensive plan looks at future land use and helps the staff and the elected officials think about where new development can occur and the types of development that can go there. Well, the comprehensive plan also includes a lot of other policy areas as well that I'm going to briefly talk about. Now, two of these that were already identified as priority areas, both in the previous plan, but then even more so now, are focused on economic development and housing. So I'm going to step through these pretty quickly on the next two slides. Now, for economic development, now the good thing is the county already has a development authority in the organization called DeKalb, and they actually recently completed a strategic economic development plan that really looked at the target industries for the county, looked at potential areas for growth and development, tried to think about the issues related to workforce development, and tried to pull all that together into a strategy, a cohesive strategy for the whole county. In a lot of ways, our recommendations really are focused on taking that plan, seeing how anything in there may need to change based on the draft recommendations from the unified plan. Some time has passed since that plan was completed. The pandemic obviously kind of came and is now starting to fade into the background some. And so has anything changed related to retail, related to redevelopment, related to investment in any of these areas? So dust off the plan, kind of update things that need to be updated, make sure the land use kind of is reflected in this plan, and then focus on interacting with and coordinating with DeKalb in a more meaningful way. Placing additional and greater emphasis on economic development in underserved and marginalized communities. The previous strategic economic development plan definitely gave a nod to that. But a lot of what we heard was the need to focus on that even more. Are there specific tools? Are there specific things that we can do in areas that haven't seen the investment that maybe some other areas have? The good news is DeKalb recently actually hired a new staffer who's specifically focused on targeting and serving those communities and what they need most. And then finally, just supporting additional workforce development efforts. There's already a lot underway, but there's a lot still needed to be done to make sure that our residents here in DeKalb are trained for the types of jobs that we want to see come into the county. Next slide. Housing. Housing is a topic that is top of mind for a lot of folks, and it covers a lot of different things. It's either new types of housing that are coming into our communities that maybe we're not so sure about on if it's appropriate or not. At the same time, there are folks that are wanting to move into an area but can't afford the units that are there, can't afford the types of residential development that's occurring. And so you have a wide spectrum of needs and challenges related to people finding appropriate housing in the county. Again, good news, the county is already underway with a housing study right now through Emory University. This is actually an update to a previous study. And so a lot of our recommendations have to do with finishing that study and identifying the specific overlap and recommendations that the comprehensive plan can support. Additionally, while there are staff at the county currently focused on housing, hiring and identifying a person that can be focused specifically on housing issues, not just housing affordability, but all housing issues across the spectrum. Creating a housing advisory committee, again, focused somewhat on affordability, but also just focused on housing issues in general. One of the things that we've heard from the housing industry and from the development industry in the region, and even broader than that, is our housing affordability issue is not just kind of a one size fits all. There's a lot of challenges and issues related to what's going on with the prices of housing. And one of the biggest challenges is we're just not building enough housing. We're not building enough housing to house the demand for folks that are moving in here. We're not building enough variety for the folks that are interested in living in not just DeKalb, but honestly, the whole metro Atlanta area. A renewed interest in preserving the existing supply of workforce and affordable housing. In some cases, those may need to be stabilized and supported and brought up to code so that they're safe places for people to live. And then in other cases, the county may need to find ways to partner with private and nonprofit organizations to identify and develop new workforce and affordable housing. So those are kind of the two initial primary areas that were already priority policy areas for the county. There's these other policy areas that are listed on the screen as well that the previous plan was a little bit quiet on, maybe a little bit silent on, that we wanted to make sure were included this time. These are things that almost from the first meetings we had with stakeholders and with the public were issues that were important. And so this is sustainability, arts and culture, and historic resources, health and wellness, retail improvements. That really has to do with a lot of these areas with the aging, dilapidated retail, especially along some of our corridors. And then finally, public safety. Public safety, not in the more traditional sense that DeKalb Police and Fire would focus on, but more so the ways that where land use and development, economic development interact and intersect with that. So think code enforcement, think investment in areas that haven't seen investment in a long time. Think lighting and safety for pedestrians who are trying to access nearby services. Let me jump back up to the top real quick. From a sustainability standpoint, the county's been doing a lot in the sustainability space for a long time. But there hasn't been a concerted, focused effort. There hasn't been a concerted, focused plan that outlined that and then could measure kind of success and progress toward that. The county has been a certified ARC green community for many years, which is a well-known program within the Atlanta region that recognizes counties and cities that pursue sustainability-related practices. The county is in a space though where they can really start to think about and define what is sustainability for DeKalb. What is it? Is it about the maintenance of our facilities? Is it the type of development that we're attracting? Is it stormwater related? Is it resiliency for any issues that are related to climate change? These are all things that the county can work through. And our recommendation is for the county to actually develop a sustainability plan that pulls a lot of that together. And that's already in the works somewhat behind the scenes as we speak. Arts and culture and historic resources, really the same thing. The county has an amazing amount of arts and culture and historic offerings already. There's just not really one person at the county, nor is there one kind of plan or policy that kind of guides how can the county support that? What exactly do our arts and culture stakeholders in the community need? What types of facilities or support do they need to thrive and grow? And how can we better advertise what's happening here? How can we better make sure that our residents and people in the county, in the region know what DeKalb has to offer? And so in the arts and culture and historic space, again, kind of the same recommendations as sustainability. Let's identify a staff person, either new or existing on staff, that can really be the point person on these issues. We have a couple of departments that touch on it. Can we have one person that's kind of focused on this day in and day out? And then develop an arts and culture master plan that brings those stakeholders together and really identifies what it is that the county can do to support the growth in that. I think that's it for the slide for now. And so I'm going to wrap up with just one more slide, and then Christina and I will be done kind of talking at you, and it'll be the time for us to kind of respond to Q&A a little more here in just a few moments. One thing we wanted to circle back on, though, Christina mentioned this previously, is the ongoing engagement right now. This is where we're really excited that you all joined us tonight. We would love for you all to actually jump on the survey as soon as this meeting is over and go take it. This will all be fresh, top of mind, and so you'll be ready to jump on and work through that. And so you'll see there's a couple of opportunities here for you to give us your feedback. One, if you go to the project website, at the very top, once you get there, you'll see a space where you can join the survey and leave us your feedback. There's actually two surveys in one focused more on transportation, one more on land use. Now, we'd love your input on all, but if you kind of find yourself in a space where you can only do one or the other, that's an option as well. Additionally, if you have the time and the interest, there are several interactive maps that you can use to actually dig in on your area of the county. Maybe there's an area that you're interested in, that you work in, that you live in, to see what transportation projects have been proposed at this point. And so there's two interactive maps that you can look at as well. And you see that shown on the right. Again, all of that can be accessed at the project website. You can see in the bottom left, it was popped in the chat a few minutes ago. We'll make sure and put it there again. And then I'll just take this moment to kind of say, if there's any other questions that come up after the meeting's over, of course, feel free to reach out to your two super district commissioners or other commissioners, but there's an email address there at the bottom. That's actually the project team's web address. And so several of us on the team will get that email if you have any follow-up questions or ideas or anything that comes to mind after we wrap up. Would appreciate your help, not just taking and providing your input on these surveys, but turning around and kind of promoting that to your family, to your friends, to your communities. Perhaps you participate in other civic organizations. Would really love your support in pushing that out to the community. So with that, I think we are done with the primary portion of the presentation.
Thank you so much for that. I'm trying to follow here all of the comments. And when I see so many comments, it makes me understand the true need for engagement. It also helps me understand that we as elected officials here in DeKalb, we have to do a better job because many of the questions that I see aren't related in some way to the unified plan, but are still very important. So Allison, I know generally you hold on to a list of questions as they come in, but I did my best to also capture questions. So if you will tell me, would you prefer to read and have our panelists respond, or should I begin with the list that I have assembled?
You can begin with your list, Commissioner, and I will cross off the ones that I see, and I will send the others over to you.
Great, thank you so much. The first question, and again, some of these questions, as I'm reading, I may take executive privilege myself and you, Commissioner Terry, to answer, because the first question that I come to here is expressed by Ms. Jewel Crawford. And she expressed concern that so little development is taking place in South DeKalb. Specifically, she states where most Black people live. What about development for our side? Let me say to you that there's a lot of things that I'm personally working on. But when we talk economic development, because I've also read comments where people said, please, I like my community as it is. No change, no development, that are even here in the comments. As we move forward with this unified plan, I receive emails, calls from individuals that say, I want more retail. But when an opportunity presents itself to increase housing, rooftops, there's no desire. And there's a direct correlation between rooftops and development. When you look at most any retail establishment, whether you're wanting to recruit a supermarket or a standard retail store, there's two things that they will ask if you seek to bring them into your community. They're concerned with, first, where is this location? Secondly, how many rooftops and what is the median household income? Once they understand, there's no more recruitment. They will tell you immediately whether or not you fit their model based upon the rooftops within that defined area. And in many parts of DeKalb, what we have is a disjointed balance, which results in either the income is high enough and not the density, the rooftops, or the density may be there, but not the median household income. I've also noticed a lot of comments focused on gentrification of communities, and that's a very real thing. As communities gentrify, it is both good and bad. It's a double-edged sword, because in many instances, the individuals that no longer live in the home, I won't use the word displaced, because I would believe that if you're selling your home, it's by your own free will. But those individuals could never afford to live in that community again in most cases. However, as communities gentrify, the median household income rises, which makes the area more desirable for business recruitment and development. So these are all the issues that we deal with at this moment. But I also always point out, because I'm a major advocate for us taking greater control of our communities and owning more small businesses. If we plan to change the trajectory of South and unincorporated DeKalb in particular, we're going to need to own more. So for anyone out there that is interested in owning a small business, then please reach out to my office and I will walk you through the process. I was successful when a gentleman came in and wanted a restaurant, which was a deviation from the current master plan off Wesley Chapel, for a restaurant. And that restaurant today, Commissioner Terry, is Chipotle. Well, when he came to me and said, I'm interested in a SLUP, I want to bring in some restaurants, immediately I said, if you want to bring burgers, chicken, or fried rice, I have no interest. I will not vote for a SLUP that's associated with those types of restaurants, because we need greater diversity. If you can produce a Chipotle or a Starbucks, you have my support. So we also have to do a better job of asking and defining what the residents of DeKalb County desire within our communities as representatives. So perhaps we have asked not and received not, but I am being very specific in my ask. However, even with that recruitment, an individual had to go through the process with the corporate office to own the restaurant, be qualified for the restaurant, and manage it. So if we want to see greater diversity in food offerings, we should consider owning restaurants in the community. So I hope I answered that question. I'm now going to go to a question posed by Don. Will these be gentrified changes? I'd like to see DeKalb County remain diversified. I'm not sure any of us can control to a certain extent those who come into a community, because that becomes redlining as it relates to the sale of homes. So when we say diversified, certain pockets of DeKalb have greater concentrations of African Americans than do certain other areas. The north area tends to be more highly concentrated with Caucasian. Why? Tell the truth, the 10 o'clock hour of Sunday is the most divisive hour in America because we're at church. And we don't choose in many instances to come into diversified environments. So I don't know, honestly, whether I have an answer for the diversity that we'll see within the communities. But I am seeing some areas that have traditionally been strongholds of African Americans, particularly the Tony Valley area and other areas off Candler Road, where I'm seeing an infusion of diversity in those areas. I'm going to turn over this question directly to the panel members. It's from Mr. Charlie Wilson. And his question is, will these plans, will the unified plan incorporate live, work, play communities? And I'm not sure if Mr. Baker would want to take this question because literally it comes down to the type of zoning. And Mr. Baker, one thing I'd like for you to answer for the folks that are here with us tonight, because we were in the last zoning meeting until 11:38.
Yes, like 24 cases.
And let me say, absolutely, we got started at 5 o'clock and we were in a zoning meeting until 11:38. I'll never forget the minute, because I couldn't believe what we were experiencing. And Commissioner Terry, as well as Planning Director Baker, if we were to update our comprehensive plan, it would eradicate the requests for many of the SLUPs we received because the land would already be approved for the usage. So as we are updating and creating this unified plan, will this resolve some of those issues so that we're not seeing so many requests that come before us? Because I do want to be clear with everyone that's a part of this conversation this evening. DeKalb is not suffering from a lack of interest from or for development. We are not suffering from that. DeKalb is the next great thing. We are just getting ourselves to that point of greatness, Commissioner Terry, I would say. So, Mr. Baker.
And I will also ask John to get ready to talk specifically about the live work. But I did want to say that the zoning districts, as well as the character areas of the comprehensive plan are the same on the north, west, east, and on the south. And some way or another, we have to attract that type of investment. And you answered the question correctly in terms of it. Not only is it the medium income and the rooftops, but it's also the amount of disposable income that the residents have that they want to spend on those types of uses. So in terms of grocery stores, just if I could take a little liberty and say that the profit margin for a grocery store is only 3%. And if the grocery stores can't make that 3%, then they're going to pack up and move out of our neighborhoods. And if they can't make the 3%, they're not going to be attracted to our neighborhoods. So we've got to find a way to not only attract them, but to keep them there and make sure that they're sustainable and they can stay. So live work, one of the great things we did with our comprehensive plan and our zoning code, which is on the website, that if you look at it, you'll see the zoning districts and you see a whole list of land uses. And you can see single family, cottages, townhouses, and you will see live work. And I think that the direction that we're going in terms of some recent rezonings is to allow for in the mixed use rezonings, they are requesting live work units. So yes, it is desirable for us to have a diverse housing stock, that is attractive to all individuals throughout that live and stay in our neighborhoods. But I'll ask John to highlight some of the uses that he's heard from the community as it relates to live work.
Yeah, thanks, Director Baker. No, man, I think you hit it pretty well. I mean, the future land use map, if you all remember back again, kind of the county, there were a lot of these little small sort of hotspots throughout. And so the plan really envisions a lot of those places developing into walkable, mixed use, kind of live, work, play communities. Now they're each going to have different flavor, different density and scale. But the idea is that in these centers where there's already shopping, there's already office, there's already some other sort of use, that we would perhaps in some cases introduce new residential, or over time introduce other uses that would just make it more of a mix of land uses, and then perhaps create an environment where even if you have to drive there, you can kind of park once and have the ability to walk around, whether it's via sidewalks or trails or things like that. And that's again where the unified plan kind of brings the land use and the transportation piece back together, is that to have a truly kind of live work type space, you need to be able to actually get around and walk around. It's not enough just to have the uses sort of kind of close to each other. You got to have the ability to actually move yourself to and from there. And so the plan definitely calls out a lot of places throughout the county where that would be allowed and encouraged. And then as Director Baker said, there's already zoning districts on the books now that would allow and encourage and support that.
And John, I'll just add to that. I mean, one of the things that I've been really sort of trying to clue in on in this plan and have been advocating for, and I think we're seeing a lot of it happen in this sort of initial drafts, is this concept of the 15-minute city or the 15-minute county, and very much how do we create that environment that that really gives a true 50-50 option for most people to say, do I drive or do I take another mode? Or maybe there's a 33 split, right? We want to really give people the true option, in my opinion. And the two sort of main top things that kind of come to mind of why we want to create a plan that leads us in that direction is, one, because of climate change. A 15-minute city is just by the very nature of what it's trying to accomplish as close to a net zero community as you can get. That's really kind of the goal, is we want to not only reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but we want to try to get to that net zero. And then affordability. When you delete some aspects of transportation costs from your monthly budget, from your kitchen table budget, and you create some opportunities for housing along some of these activity centers and these areas where you want to encourage that walking, biking, and other multimodal, and you create more affordability by virtue of doing that. And it opens up all possibilities. And so I think when we get kind of like to some of the other questions, I think we'll see that between the trail plan, the sustainability, it's really looking at a lot more things than really, it's not just land use and transportation. It's kind of like all these other things that input into it.
And Commissioner Terry, thank you so much for that. Was there, I believe there was someone else about to make a comment? No? Okay, but feel free to be interactive with this, because Commissioner Terry, I did notice there was concern for tree canopy, waterways, the creation of green space in this unified plan. I did notice that one resident said that there's not a park near her home, that she has to walk or travel quite a distance. We do not have on this call our Director of Parks, Recreation, and Cultural Affairs, Mr. Ellis. But I can say that I understand as it relates to our parks. One of the quandaries that I have, Commissioner Terry, as an elected official here, is that many of our parks are not in the best repair.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of delayed maintenance. And, I'm a simple girl, so I was always taught you don't acquire more until you take care of what you already have within your control. So I know that's not, and Commissioner Terry, everyone may not share my grand theme of things, but, we just can't. We can't continue to put what I call a bandage on a deep wound. It's time we update many of our parks. And as we do, there is a long list that we already have of green space to be extended or expanded into park space. So this remains an ongoing conversation. And even if we were to approve a park today, you don't go to the top of the list, you come to the bottom. And, you know, the one thing that I found about government, it's a slow moving vehicle.
That's right. Yes, there's lots of plans,
A
right?
lot of plans. And
That you remind me, actually, Commissioner, because we did pass that just last month. We passed that resolution accepting the free technical support from the Trust for Public Land, which is undergoing they're going to do a survey and a scientific poll of DeKalb County residents to ask the question about our parks, our green space, to reflect upon the 20, almost 20 years of park bond money that was voted on in several referendums by DeKalb County residents that raised hundreds of millions of dollars to buy green space, to improve parks. And so the good news is we have a kind of a study effort underway to ask that question of, can we, do more park and green space investments, and do the voters and the people, do they want it? So you're exactly right. The tree canopy is a concern. I do want to mention one other thing that's a little bit interesting, because DeKalb, fun fact, I think was one of the first communities in Atlanta to have a conservation community development ordinance. A specific ordinance designed to encourage more, like 60+% of conservation, that non-developed land. And I don't know if it's going to make it exactly into the plan. Maybe John knows the answer, but I know we've been working with Mr. Tooley on sort of surveying the last big parcels of undeveloped tree, canopied parcels in DeKalb County, and really trying to hone in on areas where we think that we can do conservation developments. And that's one way that we can, short of having government money to buy land, if we encourage development in a small piece of a parcel and really conserving the rest, we're actually creating an opportunity for green space and potential park space for surrounding existing residents, while also trying to address the housing issues, because we want to see new housing. We don't want to just say X, no new housing. It's already happening, and it's already, in some cases, already been zoned for housing. So it's a proactive effort. But I see Director Baker had his hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up with your comment. And we're one of the first communities to have a zoning district that tried to preserve trees. In addition, we're currently coming up or working on a community conservation or a conservation community district as well, which allows for the developer to cluster all the housing on one side of the property and leave the rest of it green. What that does for a community, though, everybody won't have R75, R85 lots. It means you have to allow for the smaller lots so you can preserve the green space. That usually requires a public hearing and a public meeting. So we need to make sure that the citizens understand the benefits of the smaller lots if you're going to conserve the canopies and the trees and so forth. I did want to just say that when a new multifamily community come in, we do require them, if they're over a certain size, to set aside land for recreation and green space for the occupants of that new development. We will be, over the next year, actually rewriting or working on our tree protection ordinance and our tree code. So I encourage those that are really heavily involved with preservation of trees that they would get involved with that process. And we look forward to their participation.
And also, as it relates to green space, I have to acknowledge Commissioner Terry, because it was totally his idea, but he reached out and said, we need to form a green initiatives committee. And I know you and I believe Commissioner Patrick, we became the members of the committee, and we did pass a policy for no net tree loss. Yep. So as development takes place, we replace any tree that's removed with a tree. Now, out of that committee, and there's a lot to talk about here, and as the chair of Public Works and Infrastructure, I have asked for a plan, and Commissioner Terry, you sit there alongside me as well, that moves us away from all of the mowing and blowing to more sustainable environments. I did notice a question or a statement saying, who's responsible for cutting the grass
Which
along Flat Shoals Parkway and all these other major corridors. And in all honesty, what I want to see is us stop cutting and create sustainable environments that take care of themselves. We can save that money. So this is what we are pushing for. And maybe, I guess, Commissioner Terry, we just need to push harder because I asked for that plan last year. And I know things take time, but just know that we see what you see. If you have the question, so do we. Now, this is a question that I want to pose, and anyone who's comfortable answering it, for Mr. Raymond White. How are incorporated cities policies included as aspects of the unified plan? Who would like to answer that question? Because I have the answer, but I want to let that come from you guys.
Maybe I could start relative to transportation. So it's actually across a number of different topic areas, but when it comes to transportation, we're working first on a project level. I know you mentioned policy specifically. We are working to coordinate projects across the city-county boundaries, as well as to look for partnership opportunities. But we're also looking at other policy aspects. We're looking at things like functional classification and truck routes to look to see where do we have potential discrepancies, where can we make sure that we are aligning? And so from a transportation perspective, there's a number of different things that we're looking at, both on the project and the policy side. John, I don't know if you want to maybe talk a little bit about how some of the unincorporated land use elements coordinate with the cities.
Yeah, for the most part, the cities control their own kind of future land use and zoning. But what we want to do is we want to think about those edges and those places where the two come together. A lot of times those can be places that folks kind of forget about. It's kind of the back door, rather than think about the places where our communities come together. And so some of our recommendations, both on the future land use map itself, but also some potential action items, is looking for places where we could actually partner with some of the cities. The other thing is, some of the green space from a trail standpoint, that makes sense how trails kind of weave in and out. But there's some green spaces that find themselves kind of between 2 or 3 different communities. And so how are we planning for protecting that as well? Some of that is handled obviously in a Parks and Rec kind of plan, but from a land use standpoint, kind of thinking about if there needs to be extra protection in that area as well.
I would say that we found ourselves in a unique situation, and that if you are abutting the city of Atlanta and on the DeKalb side, you can only do such density or intensity, and you can do such and such on the Atlanta side, then there's an incentive to that landowner to annex over to the other side in order to do what they want to do. Same thing has happened on Brookhaven, same thing happened with Decatur. So when we try to maintain a character and a flavor that DeKalb County residents want, sometimes we lose out in a bidding war, you could call it, because that property owner just then decides, oh, well, I'll go over here because there's no objections. The zoning allows me to do the intensity that I can do. But we try to coordinate with the cities. But as John said, once they're incorporated, then they hire their own staffs to do their own planning and zoning, and it really cuts us out. Sylvia?
No, you said what I was going to say. And sometimes when the cities have projects in their jurisdiction, as well as when we have projects in DeKalb, we invite those neighboring cities to attend those projects and to give input on those projects. And if they're working on a project in their city that's directly corresponding with what we're doing, we try to work on that to cross-jurisdictional to get that information needed, and making sure that we have a cohesive plan from both sides.
Understood. And now I'm going to hop right into all the questions that Allison sent over, which tells me I didn't do a great job. I don't know how far we will get down this list. This individual, Shandol Sullivan, stated, I participated in a focus group last year for development in the Glenwood Avenue, Columbia Drive area. There is currently a fire station being built at Columbia and Peachcrest. However, what else is being done or planned to develop the area? Any updates from the issues discussed in the focus group? I would venture to say, honestly, Ms. Sullivan, I wasn't a part of the focus group. We need to refer to the folk who held the focus group, and they need to be accountable for the follow-up. Ms. Smith, were you a part of that focus group?
So Brian Brewer was our project manager for that. And if the young lady that asked the question would send me a message with her email address, and Brian will address all of her information that she needs.
Understood. Now, another thing that I'm almost feeling a little bit of a connotation, we can have small area plans for specific communities. And it almost feels as though you're asking in some way, although not for a small area plan. But again, let's follow up. Let's start there. I'm going to go to the next question. Will these plans, as it relates to the unified plan, will it incorporate live, work, play communities? And again, I would believe that that's a part of zoning, depending upon how we zone, because in your higher density areas, Mr. Baker, of course, it's permitted. So I'll allow you to speak to that so that there's clarity.
Yeah, simply in our on the map, the character areas, we have these activity centers, and a lot of those requires a rezoning to a mixed use designation. And so we encourage mixed use development that will potentially include live work units, office, apartments, retail, all in a walkable community. So once you park your car, you don't have to get and drive somewhere else. All the services you need will be in that one location. So the answer to that question is yes.
Yeah, and I'll just and I'm sorry, Commissioner, I wanted to add real quickly that I think in addition to the live, work, play, I think the term intergenerational, I think, is intersectional with that concept, because I think we and I'm not sure, I know we were still like going through draft phases, but I think we should absolutely encourage or have some sort of reference to an intergenerational types of whether they're developments or just communities within that live, work, play concept. And then just to kind of emphasize what Director Baker said about this and what you said about the small area plans is we did approve money in the budget this year for small area plans, I think $300,000. So I believe you could do like between 1.5 to 3 small area plans with that kind of level of budget, maybe more if you kind of downsize them. So I know that's something that's sort of like on the work plan for the planning department. But Director Baker, do you want to mention just kind of that concept of like we have the 30,000 foot level unified plan, the small area plans can really, come after that to drill down to some of these areas that I think, we're seeing interest and, and ideas coming from the stakeholders and from the community.
Yeah, and I think that you're exactly correct. The area that the person was talking about, where the fire station is being built, it actually was a CDAP plan. We got funding from ARC actually to do that study. And what we happened, and you guys mentioned it earlier, that we do a lot of plans. You're exactly right. What we're trying to move to now is implementation. So once you've done a plan, we have to start doing the low-hanging fruit things to attract investment. We got to get the property owners to clean up through code enforcement. We got to clean up the area so it can attract outside dollars to invest. Or as Commissioner Cochran-Johnson says, we got to start our own business in those places and generate tax revenues ourselves. So if we're missing a restaurant, we need to open up the restaurant there. But thank you to all the commissioners. You did allow for funding in our budget. So we're going to be, if you have any suggestions out there in terms of the citizens about an area that you want to recommend that we study, then please reach out to us in the planning department or to your commissioners and say, I believe a great area for us to study and come up with a plan is defined by these boundaries, and submit that to us as to why you think we need to take a look at that area. And moving forward, we need to allocate the dollars for implementation of some of those items that may be part of the plan. One of the things I think I want to mention from a north-south issue is the commissioners did adopt a revitalization resolution. And part of that resolution is I will be hiring a person that's going to focus on those underserved, underdeveloped areas. And we're going to be bringing all the county departments to bear, whether it's parks maintenance, whether it's lack of sidewalks, whether it's transportation pavement, whether it's human services. All of us are going to meet with those neighborhoods one by one to bring the county's resources to bear to try to improve those underserved neighborhoods as well as set them up as ready for investment. So we definitely are trying to move in that direction.
Absolutely. And let me also say quickly, because our time has expired and there are a ton of questions. And I hear you all loud and clear, Commissioner Terry. There's been even requests in the chat saying we need to do this more often, have a candid conversation about development. So I hear you, and we will come together again for that discussion. One question, because I never want folks to be confused. It said, how are incorporated cities policies included in aspects of the unified plan? When, of course, DeKalb County has 13 different municipalities, and they have the ability to chart their own future. However, as it relates particularly to transportation and trail development, we must be in concert and each understand where the other is, particularly on the topic of mass transit. There's a lot. That's a separate town hall all in itself. And I want to thank Mr. Brady Smith for the work he's doing there, as well as Mr. Hightower, because you mentioned HB 930 and we talk about mass transit, but the truth is, on the federal level, when we talk about the monies that are available, we're not in a position right now to seek them because DeKalb County does not have a match. I'm not as concerned, Commissioner Terry, at this moment with determining whether we want heavy rail, light rail, or BRT, as I am getting a match to get us in a position to move forward. So that is what I call a slippery slope there. But again, cities are cities because they want to control their own destiny, and they have the ability to, depending on which services they choose to provide. And as a general rule, they want zoning, they want parks and recreation and code enforcement. And then the county is still left with sanitation, the police department, the heavy lifts, so to speak. Okay. But again, they have the ability to chart their own course, but we must communicate so that we can be unified in our efforts. And with that said, thank you all for joining us. I will do my best. We will send out, Allison, the list of questions, and everyone who has registered, I would believe that you would have contact information. So we will send these, the responses out next week. And I say that because we're in the middle of the week and it may take some time for everyone to respond so that you have the answers. So they will come to you via email. And Commissioner Terry, I'm going to let you close us out and do the benediction.
Okay, thank you very much, Commissioner. Before I do that, I did want to recognize you once again, because already at this stage of the public input process, have we heard so much about so many areas of the county, but one in particular that I think that really kind of kept coming up early on in the process is this idea of walking, biking, trail connectivity. And just to kind of put a point on why these plans are so important, because the plans can lead to action. And because of Commissioner Lorraine Cochran-Johnson's sponsorship and leadership on the PWI committee, she introduced and we approved a resolution, and we are working with the administration right now to develop a permanent, reoccurring established funding mechanism for trails. And certainly, as Christina pointed out, there's opportunities in future SPLOST fundings to do even more. But just you leading on knowing that this is, people have been asking about it, and it's already coming up in this plan early on, and we're not haven't even passed this plan, right? But we're already taking action on something that clearly is something that people want to see. So I'm already seeing other opportunities and other things that are in motion because of this community engagement process. So I want to close with that, because as they say, if you aren't at the table, you're on the menu, right? That's one of the sayings, and we get that a lot in government because we have to make a lot of decisions, and ultimately we have to decide what's on the menu. That's our budget. Is how we choose to govern. And so when everyone here who are just hanging on the last few minutes, if you can hear my voice, thank you for participating and thank you for engaging in this way. We have captured all of the questions, and I know we'll make an effort to respond to them, and certainly with the survey and then the Unified Planning team, I think everyone has a way to get a hold of us. So keep that dialogue going. Certainly, if you've gathered some really good nuggets from the meeting today and the information today, please share it on whether it's your neighborhood groups or your personal text chains with friends and family. Help us continue to get the word out, because we want to continue to get that feedback. We want to continue to do this engagement. But as you see, it's already shaping up to be a really comprehensive plan, and one that I think even if we achieve just a small measure of the goals, we will transform DeKalb. So this really is an impressive document. I want to thank all of the staff and the consulting team and the departments for really it's been a year and a half, and I think plus, and still more to go. So this is really a tremendous, this is a marathon effort. They have kept their stamina and their focus on it all of the way, the whole way. And we're in the home stretch here. So thank y'all for helping really just, carry us over the finish line here with final public engagement, with final ideas, with increased dialogue. And we just want to thank you. Thank you again to everyone for participating tonight. And with that completes our 2050 Unified Plan Town Hall meeting.
Yes, and let me say too, I was reading Karen's comment, Ms. Davenport, and you said, would there be such a move towards cities if they knew about the coordinated work of the county? And, I like to be very forthright in saying we haven't done all we can do, Commissioner Terry. We have not done all we can do. The cure to cityhood is good government, period. If people felt they were getting everything they should, there would be no movement towards cityhood, Mr. Baker. So when we master DeKalb and we master operations, it will eradicate the desire to go off and chart one's own destiny. So that's the day that I look forward to. I believe the unified plan is very important in getting us there, because we need to be very intentional on the future of DeKalb. If you drive down many of our major roadways, you can tell that we've not been intentional. When you look, many areas and businesses within our communities are in need of revitalization. We need more or new facades. We need code compliance to really actively get out there and do their job, but not to the point where it becomes a detriment to a business that may be struggling. So we have to set aside funds, Commissioner Terry, to allow businesses to receive grants, to update their locations. And Mr. Baker, you and I have gone on a seek and find mission all the way down by the governor's mansion, because there are some ways to do it. And Commissioner Terry, I'm going to take you on that same seek and find mission, because government is a reflection of those who represent and who are elected. If you don't like what you see, you look at those that represent you in their capacity. And with that statement, let me thank the panel members. Each one of you are valuable team players here in DeKalb County. We don't take your time lightly this evening, nor do we take the time lightly of those who joined us. I see many of our dedicated community members, too many of you to mention, but just know that I appreciate each and every one of you, your contributions, and it's because of you that I remain here, because we're in this together. And at this point, Allison, I will allow you to disconnect and everyone go and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, everyone. Have a good evening.